The throne room of Velthor Prime stretched high into the silver sky, its crystal walls catching the light of 3 distant suns and scattering rainbows across the marble floor. Princess Valith Sarin Korath stood at its center, her forearms crossed over her chest, her silver skin gleaming with barely contained fury as she listened to her father speak words that would change her life forever. "You will marry the human," the Emperor said, his voice heavy with the weight of politics and necessity. "The Galactic Concord demands unity, and humanity controls the null metal deposits we need to survive the coming decade." Valith wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to remind her father that she was a celebrated fleet commander who had won 17 battles against pirates and rebels. Instead, she stood still and silent because she was also a princess, and princesses did not throw tantrums, no matter how much they wanted to. "A human," she finally said, the word tasting strange on her tongue. "You want me to bind myself to one of those short-lived, 2-armed creatures who only discovered space travel a century ago?" Her father rose from his throne and walked toward her, all 8 feet of him towering over his daughter despite her own impressive height. His 4 hands came to rest on her shoulders in a gesture that was meant to be comforting, but felt like chains being locked around her soul. "I want you to secure our future," he said softly. "The Surak grow bold at our borders, and the Concord grows tired of our independence. We need allies, daughter, and humanity offers their vote and their resources in exchange for this marriage. They offer a single man," Valith said bitterly. "What good is one human?" "One human is all they ask us to accept," her father replied. "His name is Marcus Cole, and he arrives tomorrow. You will greet him with dignity, you will wed him within the week, and you will treat him with the respect his position as your consort demands." Valith bowed her head in acceptance because there was nothing else she could do. She was a warrior, yes, but she was also loyal to her people, and if her people needed her to marry some primitive alien to survive, then she would do exactly that. She just would not pretend to like it. The human shuttle arrived the next morning under gray skies and cold rain. A fitting welcome for a marriage built on necessity rather than love. Valith stood at the landing platform with her personal guard flanking her, their ceremonial armor gleaming despite the weather, their 4-armed salutes crisp and perfect. Shuttle door opened and Marcus Cole stepped out into the rain. Valith had studied images of humans before this moment, but seeing one in person was different. He was shorter than she expected, barely 6 feet tall compared to her 7, with only 2 arms hanging at his sides and skin the color of warm bronze. His hair was dark and cut short in a military style, and his eyes were brown like the earth of ancient Velthor before the silver. Rains had changed everything. He wore a simple black uniform with no medals or decorations. No signs of rank or achievement, nothing to suggest he was anything more than an ordinary man sent to marry a princess he had never met. "Your Highness," he said, his voice calm and even as he offered a small bow. "Thank you for receiving me." Valith studied him for a long moment, searching for something impressive, something worthy, something that might make this arrangement bearable. She found nothing but a quiet man with a polite smile who stood in the rain without complaint. "Commander Cole," she replied, using his military rank because she had been told he was a soldier of some kind. "Welcome to Velthor Prime. My servants will show you to your quarters." She turned and walked away without another word, her guards falling into step behind her, leaving Marcus Cole standing alone on the landing platform with rain running down. His face and that same calm expression he had worn since stepping off the shuttle. The wedding took place 5 days later in the great temple of Korath, where generations of Velthor royalty had bound themselves to their mates under the watchful eyes of the old gods. Valith wore armor instead of ceremonial robes because she was a warrior first and a bride second, and if the priests disapproved, they were wise enough to keep their opinions to themselves. Marcus wore the same simple black uniform he had arrived in, though someone had convinced him to add a silver sash across his chest in honor of Velthari tradition. He stood before the altar looking small and out of place among the towering aliens who filled the temple, and Valeth felt a momentary pang of something that might have been pity before she crushed it beneath her pride. The ceremony was brief and formal, words spoken in ancient Velthari that Marcus clearly did not understand, but repeated anyway when prompted. When it was over, they were husband and wife in the eyes of the Concord and the law, bound together until death or political convenience separated them. The feast that followed was a torture of forced smiles and whispered insults. Valeth watched from her place at the high table as noble after noble approached her new husband with thinly veiled contempt, mocking his 2 arms and his short lifespan and his primitive species while pretending to offer congratulations. "Tell me, human," Lord Kestrel said loudly enough for the entire hall to hear, "how does it feel to marry so far above your station? Surely you must be overwhelmed by the honor." Marcus looked up at the 4-armed noble who towered over him by nearly 2 feet, and Valeth waited for him to stammer or blush or show some sign of the humiliation he must be feeling. Instead, he simply smiled. "The honor is mutual, my lord," he said calmly. "Princess Valeth is a remarkable woman, and I am grateful for the opportunity to serve the alliance between our peoples." Lord Kestrel laughed and walked away, clearly disappointed by the lack of reaction, and Marcus returned to his meal as if nothing had happened. Later that night, in the chambers they were expected to share, Valeth made her position clear. "This marriage is politics," she said, standing by the window with her back to him, watching the 3 moons rise over the silver towers of the city. "Nothing more and nothing less. I expect nothing from you except that you stay out of my way and avoid embarrassing my family. Understood?" "Your Highness," Marcus replied from somewhere behind her. "I command a fleet." She continued, "I have responsibilities that keep me away from the palace for months at a time. You will remain here, attend whatever functions protocol demands, and otherwise occupy yourself however you see fit." "Understood." She turned to face him, searching his expression for anger or hurt or resentment, finding only that same calm acceptance that seemed to be his permanent state. It irritated her more than insults would have. "Do you have nothing to say?" she demanded. No protests, no demands, no attempt to claim the rights a husband might expect. Marcus met her eyes, and for just a moment Valeth thought she saw something flicker in those brown depths, something old and patient and far more complex than his simple exterior suggested. "I have served in many difficult situations, Your Highness," he said quietly. "I learned long ago that the best way to earn respect is through actions, not words. If you find my presence here distasteful, then I apologize, but I will do my duty to this alliance regardless of how I am treated." He bowed slightly and walked to the smaller chamber adjoining their rooms, closing the door softly behind him and leaving Valeth alone with her anger and her confusion and the strange feeling that she had somehow misjudged this quiet human who refused to react to anything she threw at him. A servant found her later, a young woman named Thessaly, who had served the royal family for decades and earned the right to speak freely. "The human seems peaceful," Thessaly observed as she helped Valeth remove her armor. "Not what I expected from a soldier. He is nothing," Valeth said dismissively, "a political token sent to secure a trade agreement. I doubt he has ever seen real combat." In the adjoining chamber, Marcus Cole sat on the edge of his bed and removed his boots with hands that bore the faded scars of old wounds. He could hear the princess and her servant talking through the walls, could hear the dismissal in Valeth's voice, and he allowed himself a small smile. He had been underestimated before it was useful. 3 months passed like water flowing through silver stones, slow and steady and unremarkable. Valeth commanded her fleet along the borders of Velthari space, hunting pirates and monitoring the growing Serac presence that troubled the Admiralty. while Marcus Cole remained at the palace doing whatever it was that unwanted husbands did with their time. She did not think about him often, and when she did, it was only to wonder briefly if he had embarrassed her family yet. Reports from the palace suggested he had not, that he spent his days studying Velthari language and history and taking meals alone in his quarters. A ghost haunting the edges of court life, without making any demands or causing any problems. It was exactly what she had asked for, and somehow it annoyed her anyway, back at the palace. Marcus had established a routine that served his purposes well. Mornings he spent in the royal library, learning everything he could about Velthari culture, politics, and military history. Afternoons he devoted to physical training in the lower gymnasium, a dusty space beneath the palace that no noble had visited in generations. The lower gymnasium had been built for servants and guards, its equipment simple and functional compared to the elegant training halls where Velthari warriors practiced their four-armed combat forms. Marcus preferred it precisely because no one would think to look for a royal consort. In such a humble place, he was running through a series of combat drills one afternoon when he realized he was being watched. A young Velthari guard stood in the doorway, all four arms crossed over his chest, studying Marcus with an expression that mixed curiosity and confusion in equal measure. He was tall like all his kind, nearly 7 feet, with the silver skin and sharp features that marked him as common-born rather than noble. "You are the human," the guard said, making it a statement rather than a question. "I am," Marcus replied, pausing his drills but not relaxing his stance. "And you are?" "Corvith," the guard said, stepping into the gymnasium. "Third rotation, palace security. I have watched you train for 3 weeks now, and I do not understand what I'm seeing." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You move wrong," Corvus said bluntly. "Your forms are not Velthari, not Cyric, not any style I recognize from my training. You have only 2 arms, and yet you compensate in ways that should not work, but somehow do. I am curious how you learned to fight like this." It was more words than anyone at the palace had spoken to Marcus since his wedding day, and he found himself appreciating the young guard's honesty. There was no mockery in Corvith's voice, only genuine interest from a warrior trying to understand something new. "Would you like to find out?" Marcus asked, and something in his tone made Corvith's eyes narrow with sudden alertness. "Are you challenging me, human?" "I am offering to spar," Marcus said with a slight smile. "If you are interested." Corvith considered this for a long moment, his 4 hands flexing unconsciously at his sides. He was young, but he was trained, a soldier who had fought real battles and earned his position through skill rather than birth. The idea of sparring with a 2-armed creature half his size should have been laughable. Instead, he found himself nodding. "Very well," he said, moving to the center of the training floor. "Show me what humans call fighting." They bowed to each other in the Velthari manner, Corvith's 4-armed salute crisp and formal, while Marcus offered a simple incline of his head. Then they began. Corvith attacked first, confident in his superior reach and extra limbs, his upper arms striking high while his lower arms guarded his torso. It was a standard opening that had served him well against opponents from a dozen different species. Marcus was not there when the blows landed. He moved sideways and low, ducking under Corvith's guard and striking at joints and pressure points that the young Velthari had not thought to protect. His style was brutal and efficient, wasting no motion, every movement flowing into the next with a precision that spoke of decades of practice. Corvith adjusted, using his extra arms to create a defensive web that should have been impenetrable. Marcus simply changed his angle of attack, finding gaps that Corvith did not know existed, exploiting the split-second delays between one arm's movement and another's. Spar lasted perhaps 5 minutes before Corvith found himself on his back with Marcus's knee on his chest and a hand at his throat. Not pressing but present, a clear statement of victory. "How?" Corvith gasped, staring up at the human with wide eyes. "You are smaller, slower, weaker in every way that matters. How did you defeat me?" Marcus stood and offered his hand, helping the young guard to his feet with surprising strength. "I am not slower," he said calmly. Humans evolved as persistent predators on a death world where everything wanted to kill us. We did not have claws or armor or extra limbs, so we learned to think faster, to adapt mid-fight, to use our environment and our enemies' expectations against them. He picked up a water container and took a long drink before continuing. "You expected me to fight like a Velthari with fewer arms," he explained. "So you defended against attacks that a Velthari would make. I am not Velthari. I do not think like your people or move like your people. And that confusion gave me the advantage." Corvus rubbed his chest where Marcus's knee had pinned him, a new respect growing in his eyes. "Will you teach me?" he asked. "Not to fight like a human. I know that is impossible, but to understand how humans think so I can defend against them?" Marcus studied the young guard for a moment, seeing something genuine beneath the silver skin and alien features, a warrior's hunger for knowledge that transcended species. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "Same time. And bring a friend if you like. I learn better when I have multiple opponents." Corvus bowed deeply, a gesture of respect that he would never have offered to the princess's unwanted husband 3 months ago, and left the gymnasium with his mind spinning with new possibilities. Word spread quietly among the lower guards, passed in whispers and knowing looks. The human was not what they had expected, not weak or soft or primitive. And those who sparred with him learned things about combat that their formal training had never taught. The Marcus asked only that they keep these sessions private, and they agreed because warriors understood the value of hidden strength. The nobles continued to mock the princess's pet human, while the guards who protected them knew the truth and said nothing. Meanwhile, far from the palace, Velith received intelligence that turned her blood cold. "The Sirik are massing at the border," her admiral reported, his 4 hands gesturing at holographic displays showing enemy fleet movements. Not raiding parties or scouts, but a full invasion force. "Enough ships to threaten our core worlds." "How long?" Velith demanded. "Weeks at most," the admiral replied grimly. "They are waiting for something, some signal or opportunity. But when they move, it will be fast and overwhelming." Velith studied the displays with the cold calculation that had made her famous, weighing options and strategies against the harsh reality of numbers that did not favor her people. "What of the Concord?" she asked. "Will they honor their defense treaties?" "Unknown," the admiral admitted. "The Concord moves slowly, and the Sirik know this. By the time our allies agree to act, the war may already be lost." Velith thought of her father on his throne, of her younger sister Nylora, who was just 16 and barely trained, of the millions of Velthari who depended on her to keep them safe. She thought briefly of her human husband sitting, useless in the palace, and felt a flash of bitter resentment, that she had been forced to waste time on politics. When war was coming, she did not send word to Marcus about the danger. Why would she? What could one human do against the storm that was approaching? It was a decision she would later regret more than any she had ever made back at the palace. A Sirik diplomatic shuttle landed for what was called a routine visit, and Marcus Cole attended the formal dinner that protocol demanded. He sat far from the high table where the ambassador held court, watching and listening as the insectoid creature traded pleasantries with Velthari nobles who did not yet know they were being measured for conquest. The ambassador noticed him eventually, compound eyes fixing on the lone human with an expression that might have been amusement. "So this is the creature humanity sent to secure their alliance," the Sirik said, his voice buzzing with barely concealed contempt. "A pet for the princess, nothing more. Tell me, human, does it not shame you to be traded like livestock?" The nobles around the table laughed. eager to join in the mockery, and Marcus felt their eyes on him, waiting for him to crumble under the weight of their scorn. Instead, he met the ambassador's gaze directly, something that Sirach considered a challenge among their kind, and held it without blinking. "I am here to serve the Alliance," Marcus said quietly, nothing more and nothing less. The ambassador's mandibles clicked in what might have been irritation, and after a long moment he looked away first, returning his attention to more important matters than a single insignificant human. But Marcus had seen something in those compound eyes before they turned away, something cold and calculating that had nothing to do with diplomatic pleasantries. The Sirach were planning something, and whatever it was would not be pleasant for the Velthari, who thought themselves safe behind their treaties and their walls. Filed this observation away and continued eating his meal in silence. The quiet consort who noticed everything and said nothing, waiting for the Manan. The attack came without warning on a night when 3 moons hung full and bright over Velthar Prime, their silver light turning the palace into a beacon that guided the enemy straight to its heart. Sirach dropships screamed down from orbit, bypassing the defensive fleet that Valith commanded 100 light years away, striking at the one target that would break Velthari morale faster than any military victory. The royal family, Marcus, was in his quarters when the first explosions shook the palace, throwing him from his bed and sending cracks racing across the crystal walls. Alarms began to wail, a sound he had learned meant invasion rather than accident. And he was moving before his mind fully caught up with his body. He grabbed a combat knife he kept hidden beneath his mattress, a habit from his military days that had never left him, and ran toward the sounds of screaming. The palace corridors had become a nightmare of smoke and fire and fleeing servants. Sirach drones poured through breaches in the walls, their insectoid bodies chittering with hunting cries as they cut down anyone in their path. They were not here for conquest, but for slaughter. A decapitation strike designed to kill every member of the royal bloodline. Before help could arrive, Marcus moved through the chaos like a shadow, avoiding the main conflicts where guards fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. He knew where he needed to go because he had spent 3 months learning every corner of this palace, every passage and shortcut and hidden route that might one day prove useful. The royal children were gathered in the eastern wing, a protected area with reinforced walls and emergency shelters. Princess Nylara would be there, along with the children of noble families who had been attending a celebration that evening. Young lives that the Sirach would extinguish without mercy if they reached them. He found Corvith first, the young guard bleeding from a wound across his chest, but still fighting, holding a corridor intersection against a swarm of drones with 3 other soldiers who looked barely old enough to hold weapons. Marcus, Corvith shouted in surprise, parrying a claw strike that would have taken his head. "What are you doing here? You need to evacuate." "The children," Marcus said, taking position beside him and driving his knife into the throat of a drone that got too close. "Are they still in the eastern wing?" "Yes, but the route is blocked. There must be 50 drones between here and there. Then we go through them." Corvith stared at him as if he had lost his mind, which perhaps he had, but there was no time for arguments. Marcus grabbed a fallen Velthari blade from a dead guard's hands, a weapon nearly as long as he was tall and far too heavy for a human to wield effectively, held it one-handed and started walking toward the eastern wing. The first drone that came at him died before it knew it was in danger, Marcus's blade taking its head with a single stroke that should have been impossible given the weapon's weight. The second and third died just as quickly, the human moving through them with a brutal efficiency that left Corvith and his guards staring in shock. "Come on," Marcus shouted over his shoulder. "We need to move." They moved. The fighting retreat to the eastern wing took 40 minutes that felt like 40 hours. Marcus led from the front, his blade rising and falling in a rhythm of death that painted the palace corridors with Sirach blood. He did not fight like a Valkyrie, did not use the formal stances and techniques that warriors of this world spent decades mastering. He fought like something older and more savage. A predator from a death world where mercy was weakness and hesitation meant extinction. He used the environment as a weapon, collapsing pillars onto groups of drones, luring them into choke points where their numbers became a disadvantage, setting fires to block pursuit and buying precious seconds with smoke and flame. He took wounds that should have slowed him. A claw rake across his ribs that left them visible. A bite on his left arm that tore muscle down to the tendon. A blow to the head that sent blood streaming into his eyes. He did not slow down, did not stop, did not even seem to notice the damage his body was taking. Corvith watched in awe and growing terror as the quiet human he had sparred with in the gymnasium became something else entirely. A force of nature that simply refused to fall, no matter how much punishment it absorbed. They reached the eastern wing to find the door, barricaded and a group of drones working to tear it down. Marcus hit them from behind while they were focused on their goal, his blade carving through chitin and flesh, until nothing remained but twitching corpses and the sound of frightened children crying behind the reinforced door. "Open up," Corvith shouted, pounding on the door with all four hands. "It is Corvith of the third rotation. We are here to evacuate you." The door cracked open to reveal Princess Nylara, her silver face streaked with tears, and her forearms wrapped around a child barely old enough to walk. Behind her cowered a dozen more young Valkyrie, nobles and servants mixed together in terror, their eyes wide with the knowledge that death had come very close. "You need to move," Marcus said, his voice rough with exhaustion, but still calm, still controlled. "There is a shuttle bay 3 levels down with emergency transports. We can get you out if we go now." Nylara stared at him, at the blood covering his body and the wounds that should have killed him twice over, at the primitive human who had somehow appeared in the middle of a massacre to save her life. "You are the princess's husband," she said, as if only now remembering that he existed. "I am," Marcus replied. "And right now I am the only thing standing between you and the Sirac. Can you walk?" She nodded, gathering the children with quick gestures while Corvith and his remaining guards formed a protective circle. They moved as a group through corridors that had become tombs, stepping over the bodies of guards who had given their lives to slow the enemy advance. Twice more they encountered Sirac patrols, and twice more Marcus led the charge, his stolen blade breaking on the third engagement and forcing him to continue with just his knife and his bare hands. He killed a drone by driving his thumbs through its compound eyes, killed another by snapping its neck with a technique that Corvith had never seen before, killed a third by using its own claw to tear open its throat. The children watched in horrified silence, too scared to scream, clinging to each other and to Nylara, who kept them moving with whispered reassurances that the human would protect them. They reached the shuttle bay to find one transport remaining, its engines already warming as the pilot prepared for departure. A Sirac commander stood between them and the ramp, larger than the drones they had fought before, its carapace thick with the scars of old battles and its mandibles dripping with fresh blood. "Run," Marcus told Corvith, pushing the young guard toward the shuttle. "Get them aboard and launch. I will not leave you." That was not a request. Marcus walked toward the Sirac commander, his knife held loose at his side, his body screaming with pain that he had pushed so far down it might as well have belonged to someone else. The commander watched him approach with what might have been amusement, its compound eyes tracking this strange small creature that dared to challenge it. Alone they fought. It was not a battle so much as a brutal exchange of violence. The commander's superior size and strength matched against Marcus's speed and utter disregard for his own survival. Claws tore into his flesh while his knife found gaps in chitin armor. Each wound he took answered with a wound he gave, until both of them were painted with blood that mixed human red with Sirak green. The commander caught him finally, all four of its arms pinning him against the shuttle bay wall with enough force to crack ribs. Its mandibles opened wide, ready to bite through his throat and end this annoying creature once and for all. Marcus smiled. He had been waiting for this moment, for the commander to overcommit, to leave itself open in its certainty of victory. His right hand found the gap between head and thorax, while his left drove his knife upward through the soft tissue beneath the commander's jaw. They fell together, Marcus landing on top, driving the blade deeper until the commander stopped moving and the light faded from its compound eyes. "Go," he shouted at the shuttle, his voice barely a whisper now. "Launch." Corvith dragged him up the ramp as the engines roared to life, the transport lifting off through a hole in the bay doors and climbing toward orbit where Valkyrie warships were finally arriving to turn the tide of the battle below. Marcus collapsed on the shuttle floor, surrounded by children who stared at him with expressions he could not read through the blood in his eyes. Nylara knelt beside him, pressing her hands against the worst of his wounds, her voice breaking as she called for medical supplies that no one could find. "Why?" she asked him, tears running down her silver cheeks. "Why did you do this for us?" Marcus tried to answer, but darkness was creeping in at the edges of his vision, his body finally demanding payment for everything he had forced it to do. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was Nylara's face above his own, her eyes wide with wonder and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Vadis' fleet arrived 3 hours later to find the palace burning and her sister alive. The report she received made no sense at first. Stories of a human who had walked through an army of Sirak to save children who were not his own, who had fought like nothing anyone had ever seen, who had taken wounds that should have killed him a dozen times and simply refused to. The footage leaked across the Galactic Concord's networks within days, spreading from world to world like a virus that no firewall could contain. Security recordings from Velthor Prime showed what happened when the Sirak attacked, showed the chaos and the slaughter and a desperate last stands of guards who died, protecting their charges, and they showed Marcus Coldwell. Species watched a single human fight his way through corridors filled with enemies, watched him take wounds that should have been fatal and keep moving, watched him kill with hands and blade and anything else he could reach. They watched him face a Sirak commander twice his size and win through sheer refusal to accept defeat. The Velthori called him Velkin, a word from their ancient tongue that meant one who will not fall. It was a title that had not been bestowed on anyone in 400 years, reserved for warriors of legend who had accomplished feats so incredible that they became stories parents told their children within a week. Marcus Cole was the most famous human in the galaxy. The Sirak hegemony responded with a formal declaration that sent shockwaves through diplomatic channels. They designated Marcus Cole as a Class V strategic threat, the highest classification in their military system, reserved for individuals whose existence posed a significant danger to hegemony interests. He was the first human to ever receive the designation. When Valith heard this news, she laughed, a sound that startled her officers because they had never heard their princess laugh before. She was sitting beside Marcus's bed in the medical bay, as she had been for 3 days now, watching the machines track his slow recovery and thinking about everything she had gotten wrong. "They are afraid of you," she told his unconscious form, her voice soft in a way it had never been before. "The Sirak have conquered 100 worlds, and they are afraid of one human. I think I am beginning to understand why." She reached out and took his hand, another gesture she never would have considered a week ago, and held it gently as she continued to speak. "My father sent me your file after the attack," she said. "The real file, the one that was sealed before our wedding. I know about Titan 3 now, about what you did there. The file had been brief but devastating. Titan III had been a mining colony attacked by pirates seeking to ransom the civilian population. Marcus had been part of a small security detachment, young and inexperienced. When the assault began, he had held a corridor for 9 hours, while civilians evacuated through the only safe passage, fighting wave after wave of attackers with nothing but determination and a refusal to die. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found him standing over a pile of bodies, barely conscious. His weapons long since destroyed, and his hands torn to ribbons from fighting bare-fisted, was the only member of his unit to survive. "You requested no medal," Valeth said, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. "Only reassignment to a quiet posting where you could recover in peace. And then Earth's council chose you for this mission. Sent you here to marry a princess who treated you like dirt. And you said nothing." She was silent for a long moment, watching his chest rise and fall with steady breaths. "I thought you were weak because you did not fight back against the insults," she admitted. "I thought your silence was submission. Your patience was passivity. Your calm was cowardice. I was a fool, Marcus Cole, and I am sorry." He did not respond. Lost in the deep sleep his body needed to heal. But Valeth stayed anyway, because she had nowhere else she wanted to be. Galaxy continued to react to the footage in ways that surprised everyone. Human embassies reported a surge in interest from species that had previously dismissed humanity as irrelevant. Sudden requests for alliance talks and trade negotiations and cultural exchanges that would have been unthinkable a month before. "They are not afraid of us," Earth's ambassador explained in a message to Valeth. "They are reconsidering us, which is different and perhaps more valuable. One human showed them what we are capable of, and now they want to know if there are more like him." "Are there?" Valeth asked. The ambassador smiled, a human expression that Valeth was beginning to find less alien than she once had. "We are all like him," the ambassador said. "That is what makes us human." Marcus woke on the 4th day with Valeth still beside him, her head resting on the edge of his bed, and her 4 arms folded beneath it like a pillow. The medical machines chirped an alarm at his movement as she startled awake, her eyes finding his face with an expression of relief so profound it took her a moment to remember that she was supposed to be dignified. "You are awake," she said. And then, because she could not think of anything else to say, she repeated it. "You are awake. The doctors were not certain when you would wake. If you would wake, they said the damage was bad," Marcus finished, his voice rough from days of silence. "I can feel how bad it was." He tried to sit up and failed, his body refusing to cooperate with commands it was not yet ready to follow. Valeth helped him, adjusting the bed with controls her hands found without looking, positioning him so he could see her properly. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked, and there was no anger in her voice now, only a desperate need to understand. "About Titan III, about what you could do, about who you really were." "You did not ask," Marcus said, the same words he had spoken on their wedding night, but weighted differently now, heavy with meaning that had not existed before. "I should have asked," Valeth replied. "I should have asked 100 things, but I was too proud and too blind and too certain that I already knew everything worth knowing about you." "I am sorry, Marcus." It was the first time she had ever used his first name. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said. "You were protecting your people in the way you knew how. And a political marriage to an unknown alien must have felt like a threat to everything you had worked to build. I understood your caution even when it hurt." "It hurt you?" Marcus smiled slightly, an expression that transformed his face in ways Valeth had never noticed before. "Of course it hurt," he said. "I am human, not a machine. Being dismissed and mocked and treated as worthless for 3 months was not pleasant. But I knew that words were not how I would earn your respect, that only actions would matter in the end. And you were willing to wait," Valeth said slowly. Wait for a moment when actions would be possible, when you could show everyone what you truly were. I hope that moment would never come, Marcus replied. I hope for peace, for a quiet life, for the chance to slowly earn a place in your world through small kindnesses rather than violence. But when the Sirak attacked, I did what I have always done. You refused to stop. I refused to stop. They sat in silence for a moment, the machines humming around them and the ship vibrating gently with the engines that carried them back toward Velthor Prime. Outside the medical bay, word was spreading that the human had awakened, that the Velkin lived. And Velthori. Warriors were gathering in the corridors to catch a glimpse of the legend they had watched on their screens. The Sirak have declared you a strategic threat, Valith said finally, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips, the highest classification they have. You are apparently dangerous enough to warrant entire fleets dedicated to your elimination. I have been called worse things. I imagine you have, Valith agreed. And this time, she did smile fully, the first real smile she'd ever offered him. The court is already planning celebrations in your honor. Ceremonies and awards and titles that will take weeks to properly bestow. My father wishes to make you a prince in fact as well as name. That is not necessary. It is not about necessity, Valith said, taking his hand again in a gesture that was becoming familiar. It is about recognition, about acknowledging what you did and who you are. You saved my sister, Marcus. You saved children who would have died without your intervention. You proved yourself in ways that even our greatest warriors could not have matched. She paused, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him forget the pain still throbbing through his body. And you proved something else, she continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. You proved that I was wrong about everything. About humans, about you, about what this marriage could be. I wed you for politics and treated you as a burden, but you never once complained, never once demanded better, never once stopped being kind even when kindness was not returned. What are you saying? Marcus asked, though he thought he might already know. I'm saying that I would like to start again. Valith replied, not as strangers bound by treaty, but as partners who have chosen each other. I am saying that I see you now, truly see you. And what I see is someone I want to know better. Someone I want beside me not because politics demands it, but because I have realized that there is nowhere else. I would rather have you. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Valith felt her heart begin to sink as she wondered if she had misread everything. If her cruelty had destroyed any chance of the connection she was only now realizing she wanted. Then he squeezed her hand, his grip weak but present, and smiled at her with eyes that held warmth she had never allowed herself to see before. I would like that, he said simply. I would like that very much. Outside the medical bay, a young guard named Corvith stood with bandages still wrapped around his chest and tears streaming down his face. He had been the one to insist on waiting outside, refusing to leave until he knew his friend would. 6 months after the attack on the palace, the Sirak returned with a fleet large enough to darken the stars. 3,000 warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Velthori territory, their weapons hot and their intentions clear. And the message they broadcast left no room for negotiation. Surrender or burn. Valith stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Flame, watching the enemy formation on holographic displays that painted the command deck in shades of threatening red. Beside her stood Marcus Cole, no longer the quiet consort who attended functions and stayed out of the way, but her official military advisor and the most famous human in the galaxy. He had healed from his wounds, but the scars remained, visible reminders of what he had done and what he was capable of. The crew of the Eternal Flame treated him with the same respect they showed their princess, perhaps more, because they had all watched the footage from the palace and they all knew what he had accomplished with nothing but a blade and his bare hands. The Concord fleet is still 3 days away. Admiral Kethos reported, his four hands moving across tactical displays with practiced speed. "We are outnumbered 5-1 and outgunned by a factor I do not wish to calculate. Your Highness, we cannot win this battle through conventional means." "Then we will not use conventional means," Valith replied, her voice calm despite the fear that coiled in her chest. "Marcus, tell them." Marcus stepped forward, his presence commanding attention in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. Every officer on the bridge turned to listen as he began to speak. "The Sirac command structure is centralized," he explained, gesturing at the enemy formation where one ship stood larger than the rest. "Their Hive Admiral directs the fleet through a neural link that connects every drone and every captain to a single controlling intelligence. Destroy the flagship, and you destroy their coordination. We know this," Admiral Kethos said with a hint of impatience. "But their flagship sits at the center of their formation behind walls of defenders. We would lose half our fleet just getting close enough to fire, which is why we will not fire from a distance," Marcus replied. And something in his tone made every spine in the room stiffen with sudden alertness. "We will board them." Silence fell across the bridge, broken only by the hum of engines and the soft beeping of tactical computers. Boarding a Sirac flagship during a fleet engagement was not a strategy. It was suicide dressed up in military terminology. "That is insane," Kethos said finally. "That is human," Marcus replied with a slight smile. "We call it aggressive negotiation." He turned to face the holographic display, pointing out elements of his plan as he spoke. "The Sirac expect us to fight defensively, to protect our worlds while waiting for reinforcements that may not arrive in time. They have positioned their fleet to counter exactly that strategy, spreading their forces to block every escape route and cover every angle of attack." His finger traced a line through the center of the enemy formation. "They have not planned for an assault directly at their heart, because no sane commander would order such an attack. We will sacrifice the orbital stations around Velther Prime. Let them think we are broken and desperate. Lure them in close for what they believe will be the killing blow." He paused, letting the weight of what he was proposing settle over the room. "And then we punch through with everything we have. Drive a spear straight into their command ship, and cut the head off the snake before it knows it is dying." Admiral Kethos stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "The losses would be catastrophic," he said slowly. "Even if we succeed, we would lose thousands of warriors. We will lose millions of civilians if we fail," Valith replied, stepping up beside Marcus and placing her hand on his shoulder in a gesture that declared her support more clearly than words. "The Sirac do not take prisoners, and they do not show mercy. This is not a choice between winning and losing. It is a choice between fighting and dying." She looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of every officer present. "I will lead the boarding party myself," she announced, "alongside my husband and any warrior brave enough to join us. We will take that flagship, or we will die trying, but we will not surrender and we will not run." The bridge erupted in sound. Voices raised an argument, an alarm, and something that might have been admiration. Admiral Kethos held up all four hands for silence and spoke when it finally fell. "This is madness," he said, and then a fierce smile spread across his silver face. "But it is the kind of madness that wins wars. We will follow you, Your Highness, into the heart of the enemy and out the other side." The battle began at dawn on Velther Prime, though in space there was no dawn and no night, only the cold light of distant stars and the burning glow of weapons fire. The Sirac fleet advanced exactly as Marcus had predicted, closing in for the kill while Velthari defenders fell back in apparent desperation. The orbital stations burned, sacrificed to sell the illusion of defeat, and the Sirac pushed forward with the hunger of predators who smell blood. They did not notice the Velthari fleet reforming behind the debris. did not see the assault shuttles launching in the shadow of dying stations, did not realize until too late that they had been herded exactly where their enemies wanted them. The Eternal Flame led the charge, her engines screaming at maximum power as she drove straight toward the Sirach command ship, with 100 smaller vessels following in her wake. Sirach warships turned to intercept, but they were too slow, their reactions delayed by the same centralized command structure that was supposed to be there. Strength Marcus stood beside Valeth in the shuttle bay, surrounded by warriors who had volunteered for what might be a one-way mission. He wore Velthary armor modified to fit his smaller frame, carried weapons that had been designed for his hands, and met the eyes of every soldier around him without flinching. "Today, we show the galaxy what happens when they underestimate us," Valeth said, her voice carrying through the speakers to reach every warrior in the bay. "Today we fight not for survival, but for victory. Not for ourselves, but for everyone who will come after us. Today we write a story that will be told for 1,000 years." She drew her blade, all 4 arms raising weapons that gleamed in the shuttle bay lights. "For Velthar Prime. For Velthar Prime." 100 voices roared back. The assault shuttles launched into a storm of defensive fire that turned the void into a hellscape of explosions and debris. Marcus felt his stomach lurch as their pilot executed maneuvers that should have torn the craft apart, weaving through gaps in the enemy formation that seemed to exist only in the pilot's imagination. They hit the Sirach flagship hard, the assault shuttle's cutting beam carving an entrance through the hull while warriors braced for impact. The moment they were through, the ramp dropped and Valeth charged forward with Marcus at her side. The fighting inside the flagship was close and brutal, exactly the kind of combat where human advantages mattered most. Marcus moved through the corridors like death-given form, his weapons finding targets with the same terrible efficiency he had displayed at the palace, his body adapting to each new threat before his conscious mind had time to analyze it. Valeth fought beside him, her 4 arms working in perfect coordination, her blade dancing patterns of destruction that complemented his more direct approach. They had trained together in the months since his recovery, learning each other's styles and preferences, developing the wordless communication that turns individual warriors into something greater. They reached the command deck to find the Hive Admiral waiting for them, a massive Sirach whose carapace was covered in the neural interfaces that connected him to every ship in his fleet. His compound eyes tracked their approach with cold calculation as Sirach guards moved to intercept. "You cannot win," the Hive Admiral said, his voice buzzing through translation implants. "Even if you kill me, my fleet will destroy your world." "This gesture is pointless. Then why are you afraid?" Marcus asked, and he smiled as he said it. The same calm smile he had worn on the day he arrived on Velthar Prime. They attacked together, Valeth striking high while Marcus went low, their movements synchronized by months of practice and the desperate clarity that comes only in battle. The Sirach guards fell one by one, overwhelmed by warriors who fought with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Hive Admiral was another matter. He was faster than his size suggested, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to match Valeth's 4-armed assault while keeping Marcus at bay with sweeping strikes that could crush armor and bone. Neural feeds crackled around him as he directed his fleet through sheer force of will. Multitasking at a level that should have been impossible of, Valeth pressed her attack, forcing him to focus on defense, while Marcus circled for an opening that would not come. The Hive Admiral was too experienced, too skilled, too connected to his ship and his fleet to be caught off guard by such simple tactics. Then, Valeth's stumbled claw caught her across the chest, tearing through armor and the flesh beneath, sending her crashing to the deck with blood already pooling beneath her. The Hive Admiral raised all 4 arms for a killing blow that would end the Velthary royal line forever. Marcus did not think he moved, putting himself between the claw and Valeth. taking the blow meant for her across his back with a sound that should have been a scream but came out as a growl. Pain exploded through his body,